Now, for all of you out there, we've got something special to bring to you here. We have talked about our football 101s for a while, and Brian has dabbled in the football 101s here a little bit, but we had always wanted to add a little bit of tech to our football 101 because
we can really just show you things.
Yes. So if you're a coach, okay, you have to know how to use a whiteboard. Okay, or a chalkboard, depending on how old you are, right? But you got to be, or the older coaches.
I never had a chalkboard.
I never
like one year in like camp we had a chalkboard, but yeah, it was always
the older coaches who had the chalkboard called a whiteboard a grease board. I don't know if you've ever heard that one before.
I've heard that.
Okay, yeah. But you got to know how to grab the marker and draw up plays, okay, and draw up schemes and draw up this and draw up that. We had to have that. Look, man, we're coaches.
Yeah.
We feel lost without our dry erase marker.
So for today's show, we've been wanting to really dive into field versus boundary.
Yes.
But it's, you're not going to coach your players up with just words. You need to show it to them, right? So that's what we're going to do. So today is our first installment of our new and revamped Football 101. So today, Vince, we're going to talk about field versus boundary. We're going to show you field versus boundary, what determines field versus boundary, why it's important in the college game to understand as players and coaches what is the field side, what is the boundary side, and what are some of the advantages and disadvantages there are to being field or boundary. So that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to start off by bringing up the old chalkboard here and kind of show you it's an interactive thing. And so this is a clip from the Notre Dame Clemson game on November 7th. And so we're going to look at this from the defensive point of view first and foremost, and we're just going to quickly define what is field and what is boundary. So the first thing you have to do is you have to identify where is the football.
Right. And this is the all 22. This is the all 22 look. Got the whole, everybody's on the screen.
Right. So we're going to look at this from the Notre Dame defense's point of view. Okay. So the ball is here, right? So right here on the left hash. See that? That's the ball. So left hash. And so for Notre Dame, declaring the left side is how they're going to set their defense. Okay. So what does it mean to set your defense? Okay, so the way that Notre Dame played last year, and we're going to see some of those similar things with Marcus Freeman, is depending on where the hash was. So there's two ways to set your alignment. One is formational strength. So when I played, that's what was used a lot more, Vince, was
absolutely.
Where's the tight end? Where's the three side? If a team was a three receiver team, okay, where was the numbers? Okay, the strength could be either to the tight end or strength could be to the numbers. There's 3x1, we're setting strength to the numbers.
Right.
But if there's 3x1 with a tight end backside, some teams would still set their strength, their front seven strength to the tight end, and then set
run
their
strength,
coverage strength to the field with the three receivers. Yeah. Nowadays, more and more people are field boundary.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we were doing so Brian, I don't know if you could point out the different positions on here with your little marker.
So we'll do that. But so first, just simply put,
I was just going to say, in the old vernacular, this is an even strength,
right? Because it's a 2x2,
right? And the running back is directly behind,
right?
The quarterback.
So then, what they would have to decide is who are these players up here?
Right.
If one of these guys is a tight end, then you would set this side as the strength, right? That would be the strength. Okay. Now, in this situation nowadays where you just don't see as much of that, the way that Notre Dame sets it now is field boundary. So here's the ball. Okay. So it's on the left hash. And so essentially Notre Dame is now going to set this quote unquote strength of their formation to the field side, which is this. Okay. This is the field. The field is essentially the wide side of the field. So if this is where the ball is, this is all field. This is the boundary. Okay, that's the boundary side. So the short side of the field. Now, if the ball is, let's say here, sort of the left middle, you'd still set it field right, boundary left. Where it would change is if the ball gets in the middle of the field. Okay, so if the ball's in the middle of the field, then a lot of times you will still kind of almost go old school and say, we're going to set it to the strength of the formation, right? So the 3x1 side or whatever the case may be. Or you might just say, hey, look, we know this team tends to play more right-handed or this team tends to play more left-handed. And so in that situation, we're going to set it to that side that they tend to play on, okay? And so but the ball is rarely in the middle of the field. It's usually in the middle, like this would be called like left middle right here, and this would be called just left. This is center, and then right here would be right middle, and then right. Those are the 5 basic, places. So here, down here, you're obviously going to set this would then turn. If the ball was on here, then this would turn this into the boundary side. So that is essentially, that's the basic of what field boundary is. Okay, so Vince. The next piece is, so how does it affect where you line up? And this is what you were going to get at, right? So this is your big end, right? Notre Dame's big end in their base defense in the past years was always going to be to the field side. Okay, so the ball is on the left side, the ball's to the left of the defense. So you're going to have your big end, your nose tackle, your 3 technique, and your Viper are going to be set as such. Viper 3 technique, more often than not, go to the boundary. Nose tackle, big end, go to the field.
And
same
Rover.
thing here, right? Rover here, second level. Rover is here. And the Will is always going to be, more often than not, going to be a boundary guy. Now, there are times when they will bump the Mike out, and he'll play more of strong, and then the Will bump in, but you're still setting the side of, so the Mike will be to his right when the ball is, when the ball is in the boundary on the left hash. If the ball was down here, then you'd have the Will down here and the Mike would be here.
Yeah, the Rover is almost always to the field because of his coverage skills. That's what makes the Rover such a great position, because he's a linebacker that can cover.
Right. And we'll get to that. Let's finish up just this. So this is obviously the boundary corner is always going to go to the boundary. And then this is the field corner down here. Okay. So then they'll flip flop. All right. Now, one thing Notre Dame will do more of, Vince, as we've talked about this, is if you're playing a tempo team, a lot of times you're going to set the boundary field on the first play. But then after that, if they're going tempo, you just stay on your side.
Yep.
This is the boundary safety, and this is the field safety. They don't necessarily call them free and strong anymore. That was back in the day where you'd have like a free safety playing deep middle, and you'd have like a strong safety to the field, right? That's more of what you did back in the day. It was strong safety was kind of more in the boundary, and the free safety was more, and you'd play a lot of middle of the field, right?
Yep.
Well, now the way that Notre Dame did it last year, Kyle Hamilton was more of a boundary safety at times. This year, he's going to be more of the field safety. So you're going to see 14 here more, and then you're going to see Houston there more, is what I'm told. So you're going to see the Rover and Kyle Hamilton stacked on top of each other a lot more. Okay, so now, Vince, this is what Vince was talking about. Why is it important to set those players properly? Starting with linebackers, Vince, it's important that you make sure that your Rover is on the right part of the formation, because you don't want him down here defending the short side of the field. You want him here, Vince, and that's what you can kind of dive into and explain why it's important to make sure your Rover is aligned up properly.
Well, and if you have him in the field, you're putting him there because he can cover. That's what makes the Rover, right? He can cover a slot, he can cover a tight end, whatever the case may be, but he's better in space. The Will is better. We use this term when we were talking about Cade Madden in his sphere of influence, right? The Will is better in a smaller area, and that's why you're going to give him a smaller area to cover. If you put the Rover over there to the boundary side, you are limiting what he can do. You're limiting his effectiveness, and you're also hanging your Will out to dry, frankly. And that's why the Rover was created, Brian, was for this exact situation, because back in the day when there weren't as many, you weren't throwing the ball all over the place. You had 3 linebacker bodies, right, playing at that level, and you would bump out a linebacker, and that was a huge advantage for the offense, right? When you're matching up
because normally teams would be with the linebacker in here, the Sam would be kind of in here, and he'd kind of play over the tight end, But then with the advent of getting this guy in space, and a lot of times it being a receiver, if you bumped just a Sam linebacker out here,
good luck.
Bo Bauer, that is not a matchup you like. Right. Even against modern day tight ends, it's not. 20, 30 years ago, that's still a matchup you like, because I'll take my Sam linebacker against your 255-pound, 4'9", 40 tight end. Right. Nowadays, the way tight ends run, if this is even a Sam linebacker against Tyler Eifert, that's not a matchup that you're going to like, right?
Exactly.
I don't want I don't want Bo Bauer matched out here against Michael Mayer. You just don't.
Yep.
And especially as you get into these where it's the 11 personnel, which 11 personnel will dive into personnel, but 11 means, let's just say this is a tight end, right? So that's the one, and then one back. Okay. And
11,
then obviously
1,
three
1.
receivers, 1-1. This looks like 10 personnel, which means
I agree.
one back, 0 tight ends.
Yeah, those all look like
this one
receivers
looks
to me.
right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so yes, so this guy is going to play a lot more space. The field safety is also going to be asked to do a lot more of covering a lot of ground. So if you see here, depending on the coverage, he may have to go from here to here.
Right.
All right. So if this guy's going to be playing robber or helping out the corner down here, that's a lot of field for him to cover. Even if he has no responsibilities back here really whatsoever, this is a lot more ground to cover for him. Okay. And so that's why you want to make sure you've got a really rangy player. And also, he's got a lot of ground to cover here. So a lot of times the safety is going to fit inside behind either the rover or the Mike linebacker, depending on what the run call is. And other times the safety is going to have to be your support player, meaning he's the guy that needs to make sure you can't get outside. He's going to have to be the one that funnels everything back inside. So he's going to have a lot of different responsibilities. And at times, he's going to need to drop to the middle of the field as well. You'll also drop him to the middle of the field, the boundary safety in the middle of the field too, which gets into the corner. If you have a corner into the boundary that you think can play one-on-one and can effectively play one-on-one, and you have a Viper here, and then the Will here, and we'll get to why it's important for the Viper to be in the boundary. If you have decent cover players there, then you can do a lot more with this boundary safety playing middle of the field. And then obviously he's going to be coming down, Robin here, Robin there, playing sort of downhill. You're going to have man here, or man here and man here, depending on what they're going to do. They can also do some pattern match stuff with these guys, Vince, where these two guys basically saying, hey, we're taking these two, okay? If he goes out, he takes them, and then he's down here, right? And, there's different things that they can do in that regards where, if he kind of goes inside, he can kind of go out. But essentially, if he goes vertical and he comes out, you want the rover to take him, okay? The rover may take him, he may go out, and then this guy may come here. Then you're going to want the safety to come down and get him, and then you're going to want the backer to go there. So they can get into some pattern match, which basically is pattern match is essentially who takes who is going to be. It's sort of a hybrid zone. Alabama runs a ton of this. It's hybrid man zone where, hey, I've got this guy, but if he goes this, then you got to take him, and now I'm taking this guy, right? It's almost kind of like pick and roll in football and basketball, essentially, where, yeah, that's my man, but if they do this, I have to then go take that guy. And so you can get into some of that kind of stuff as well. But again, you're going to have a lot more range to cover. And then also, too, Vince, the Viper in the previous defense had a lot of coverage responsibilities.
Yeah.
You did not want a Viper having to cover from there. That's a lot of ground to cover, right? And really, it would almost kind of be like, well, why have him and him dropping both into coverage? It wouldn't make a lot of sense. You're going to have this guy be more of a cover guy. Whereas down here, you want your Viper to be able to play the flats and be able to play the hook curl zones. Okay,
and he can get to that flat from that
easily.
Position very, very quickly. Very quickly.
Especially when you have an athlete like a Dalen Hayes, a Jordan Patelho, and Isaiah Foskey. So that is why it's important to identify field boundary. Whereas if you get kind of caught in a situation where you're not lined up correctly and you've got your rover here, and let's say because they line up quickly, all of a sudden Shane Simon or one of your Wills or whatever, Maris is out here. That's not a matchup you're going to like as much, right? And tempo offenses are taught to for the quarterback. That's what he's taught to do. Hey, see how they line up, and if we can get him into a matchup, then we want to go immediately to a bubble. We want to do something here. We go to slant bubble, or we can do a stalk bubble, or get this guy having a chase because I feel a lot better about having that guy in space than I do having Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in space. Yep. And so that's what offenses are trying to do. Okay. So then what is field boundary determined for the offense? In college, Vince, it's going to be a lot different than in high school.
Yeah.
And the first thing is obviously the boundary, it's going to be easy for throws. This 5-yard speed out is going to be a lot easier to throw than that 5-yard beat out. The ball is going to, I don't care who's throwing the ball, Trevor Lawrence or Ian Book or Jack Cohn or whoever, that ball is going to be in the air longer than that ball. This ball is going to be a lot longer in the air, a lot longer than that ball. right?
Yes,
And the
correct.
longer the ball's in the air, the better chance that there's somebody can play it, right? Doesn't mean you don't throw to the field. It just means there's certain routes you got to know if the coverage is way off and this guy bails. Yeah, you can bang that. You can bang that, no question. But if you try to throw a 5-yard speed out, right, against this look, and this guy is even remotely close to that, and that ball hangs up, that's where you get guys stepping in front of those throws and either breaking them up or picking them off, right?
Yeah, strike up
It's
the
a
band.
little harder to do that when you're here. It just requires just a bad read. Now, Jack Cohn threw a pick on a quick out against sort of this inside look in the spring, but it was because he didn't read the linebacker correctly. So mistakes can still happen, but it was just a bad read. It wasn't, I thought I had a step, but the guy beat me to it. So that's one thing. You're going to see teams be more pass heavy into the boundary, especially one-on-one routes. And then what you'll see to the field as a coordinators, you'll see more leveled concepts, right? So let's take this guy. Let's remove this guy from the formation, okay? And let's put him here in a 3-by-1, okay? Now, to the boundary, you're not going to do a lot of 3-by-1s here because teams will do it. But if you have 3 guys here, that flood concept is really bunched.
It's just
really bunched.
And you can, when you're bunched like that, the reason it's bad for the offense, excuse me, is because a defender can guard more guys in smaller space.
Right.
You're making it easier on the defense.
Right. So whether you're 3-by-1 there or 3-by-1 here, you're going to have more often than not potentially 4 defenders that can get up underneath that. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and potentially that could be 4 or 4 depending on where the linebacker's at, okay? The difference, however, is they've got a lot more room that they have to cover out here. So when you're an offense, you run something simple like a flood concept like Notre Dame ran this spring. You get a go route outside here, you get a deep out cut here, and then if there's a third guy, he can run a 5-yard out cut, something like that. Or classic, you can do an inverse mesh of it where it's 5 here, and then this guy runs that way. Still a flood concept. You're trying to layer all 3 levels. So
and you're trying to make the defender make a decision.
Yep, intermediate level and a short level, and you're trying to isolate somebody.
This guy, okay. So the corner in this
often it's the flat defender can either be him or him, depending on who that is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's what you're trying to do, and you have a lot more room to work. Whereas if you're trying to do that into the boundary, they've got 4 guys that are really tight into that. That is 4 guys that can cover your 3 guys in a very short area. Again, that doesn't mean you can't do it, but it just means it's going to be a little bit of a tougher time to do it. So a lot of the leveled concepts you'll see in the boundary events you'll see 2-man concepts or smash concepts. A smash, as we've talked about, is a little 6-yard. Teams will do it differently. It can be a hitch. It can be a smash route, which means hitches mean you just 6 and stop. A smash, the reason I taught smash, not hitch, is because a hitch has certain rules that I don't want to have to change if they play it. So if I'm teaching a hitch route and this guy squats on my hitch, by rule, you're supposed to convert that hitch to a go route, okay? Can't do that on smash because smash is this, and then you're going to get a corner route here.
Yep.
Well, if this guy runs a go route, you're 2 guys running each other.
Exactly.
So I taught a smash concept where basically 6 yards, even if that guy sits on you, you sit on him, and then you work out, okay? And then we had a man conversion to that where if this guy was pressing you, you'd run a pivot to get him there, also to occupy him longer to open this route up, okay? Now, that's a little bit more because it's if these guys are playing underneath, you're now getting that ISO back there, okay? Or in the way that what I would do a lot is I'd bring a drag route right there, and if this safety goes there, then I'm going to try to get behind that, and then I have some sort of check release there to try to free up that linebacker to my third read is try to open that up, okay? So those are different things you can do. So anyway, that's why field boundary is important. And Vince, it's even more. You and I were talking about this and before the show, and what I found fascinating is in college, a lot of teams tend to be more boundary oriented with their pass and their run game. You said in high school it's completely the opposite.
Yeah,
explain why that is.
So in high school, we always set our strength to the boundary. To the field, because teams don't run into the boundary. They just don't, because there's not enough room in a high school field. So let me explain that real quick. So obviously everybody plays on 100 yards. Okay. 100-yard field is the same whether you're in middle school, high school, college, the NFL, it's the same. The width of the field is the same. I believe it's like 53 yards, right, Brian? Something along those lines.
Yeah, like 52 point something or 53 point something.
It's 53 and something, right? The difference from field to field to field is the hash marks. Those little stripes down the middle are different at each level, okay? And so the first level is high school, okay? In high school, the hash marks are 53 feet and 4 inches apart from each other. So you've got 53 feet in the middle of the field between the hash marks, right? So if we're still talking 53 yards wide, you've got very limited space outside to the boundary. You've got very limited space. There's not a whole lot you can do over there. If you're looking, so Brian put the little hashes just now, kind of where the ACC logo is. That's about where the hash marks are in high school, because in college, the hash marks are 40 feet apart. Okay, that's 13 foot.
And the NFL
difference.
is even narrow. There's basically no field and boundary in the NFL.
The NFL is 18 feet. It goes from 40 feet in college to 18 feet in the NFL. You're right. There's no field. There's no boundary in the NFL. And the reason they do that is because they want to create offense. Okay, the NFL squeezed their hashes together because they want to create offense. They want you to be able to go to both sides of the field. They want to mess with the defense. They want you to be able to have offense all over the field. Mm-hmm. Well, high school is different, right? So we hardly ever ran into the boundary. When I was coaching a triple option team, we would run into the boundary because you run based on what the front four tells you to do. You usually run to the one technique. And when you're in high school, your strength is to the field. So the one technique is on the weak side, and it's an easier block. So you run in your triple option to the weak side. So you're running into the boundary. But again, when you're running a more traditional offense, you're running most stuff into the field. So you're going to put most of your dudes to the field side. And that was the difference. It's funny when Brian and I started talking about it. And when I first started,
because I never coached high school, so I wasn't quite sure. Like what the tendencies were.
And when I first started covering Notre Dame, I'm like, why is the 3 technique always to the boundary? I don't understand why this is happening. And of course, Brian explained that to me, that's usually the run strength. And I'm like, okay, makes more sense now because the hashes.
And not everybody does that. I mean, some teams will set their. So this is when we'll get into some of this, but like this, for example, is an underfront, right? And so if they're going to set their strength to the field, an underfront essentially is the nose is to the quote unquote strong side. The 3 technique is to the weak side. And then you've got the viper and then the big end, as we talked about. And overfront, essentially, the ends wouldn't change, but you'd have the 3 technique here, and then you'd have the shade that side. And now the next show we're going to do tomorrow, we're going to try to start fitting these football 101s in between the normal podcast and the questions. And some of them will be short. Some of them will be a bit longer. Sure. Tomorrow is going to be a little bit shorter because it's going to be pretty basic. We're going to be going over gaps, and we're going to be going over alignments for defensive
techniques is what he's talking about. So
you
understand what that means.
And it's just you draw it up, you show it, and it's
that's like page 2 in the playbook that you get in high school.
But we wanted to have a little bit more today's show,
a little bit more fun with it.
This. So that's field boundary. Those are some of the base, and again, that's basic reasons. Like there's a lot more we could get into, and it's this team's going to be doing more personnel wise, but the reason that you say why do you want your best players a lot of times your best athletes into the boundaries, because here's the final piece. In college, in high school especially, but even in college, much more so than the pros, this right here is your 12th defender.
Absolutely.
Right? It's called the sideline. Mm-hmm. And if you have a guy here who's a really good one-on-one player, you have a pretty athletic guy there, and then you've got your viper who can drop into coverage. But really these two guys, if these two guys can play man coverage, then they can protect inside on each route, because they're okay funneling this outside because there's only so much you can do. So if I can play inside technique, right? So you say right here, Nick Watkins is playing a little bit head up. But if you take a little bit of that inside away, or even if you play head up, but then you drive on that inside cut, you're gonna be able to play that easier. Whereas if this guy is trying to run something outside, you can play inside, take away the inside. That means you can then jump the outside cuts. And there's only so much room that you can cover. The quarterback can't lead that guy to the outside as much unless he gets rid of the ball now. Whereas here, the quarterback can lead this out cut, and you catch that sucker with room to run.
Yep.
If you're playing off coverage.
Because if you look, the end of the video or the end of the picture here is not the sideline. Those are the numbers.
Right. Yeah, the sidelines.
You still got room.
Couldn't fit it all in.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is, if you have a really good one-on-one defenders, then what you can do there then is now you can get him over or you can get him down. And then now you get this safety to more of the middle of the field.
Exactly.
If you don't have a really good cover player in the corner, then this guy has to help more. And then if now you have more guys into the boundary, if you have to, and here's the other thing for an offense, if I with my matchups and my alignments can force the defense to put more guys into the boundary, that's going to be good for me.
Yep.
And so if you kind of look at this, Notre Dame is a little bit boundary heavy in this play. So there's 2 skill players here. Notre Dame technically has 4 guys that are pure boundary players, and Drew White's got a step inside the hash. That's 6 defenders that are on the hash or to the boundary. If you remember some of the things that Clemson did in that game, Vince, it's Clemson's big plays a lot of times were field plays, or like they had a play where Amari Rodgers was able to beat Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah outside on a quick outcut. Jeremiah missed the tackle. He ran for 20-plus yards. They were able to ISO Notre Dame's defense, which is where a lot of their big plays came from because Notre Dame was easier to manipulate last year from a field boundary standpoint. We saw Alabama do that a little bit too, where they knew how to get Notre Dame into the boundary and they knew how to get Notre Dame out of the boundary, which then opened up some opportunities for them. So I think we'll also see a little bit more. That's why we'll see a little bit more versatility. Now, look, most teams didn't have the players to make Notre Dame pay for that.
That's important,
right?
Yeah.
And so there's really not a lot wrong with what Clark Lee did. It's just that if you have equal players or better players,
it can hurt you.
It can hurt you, even when you have a great player like this.
Right.
So that's field boundary, Vince. That's kind of the breakdown for that. I think that's this is something I'm excited to do, and I hope that you all like that stuff. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing more of that. But we've had a lot of people ask about the football 101s, and what we're going to do too is when we're done with the shows, we're going to cut it up, and we're just going to take the football 101 piece out and put it up as its own video.
Yes.
We'll always put that on the message board. Obviously, if you have not signed up, down below, join the message board, and we'll put those up and we can talk more about it. That's where we can talk more about it. So we'll put the videos up, and if you have questions, then you can do those kind of things. So that's where we're at. That's today's Football 101. Installment number 1 was field boundary. And tomorrow we're going to talk about gap alignments and those type of things and why they matter for both sides of the ball. So that's it. And that's going to do it for the Football 101.